especially here with our clients, but also safety. I'd like to introduce Mariana to the stage. Mariana's actually worked in the media side of things before, and with companies like IRI and Nielsen, so we have a fantastic mix of technologists and marketing providers.
Hi, good morning, everyone. God, what a terrific first half of the day, and we're going to slightly change topics, and we're hopefully going to be left with a slightly bigger appreciation also for the work that our cyber defenders have in every one of our companies, and the very, very hard task that they have on a day-to-day basis. Because, of course, enterprises have evolved, and one of the hardest things for us to be able to now just try to get our heads around is how do we protect companies and enterprises and data, and then how do we protect the day-to-day working of all of our initiatives as we try to reach out and grow our businesses. And of course, the more we reach out and interact with the world, the more we also inevitably expose ourselves to vulnerabilities and tricksters. And vulnerabilities and tricksters have made quite an industry out of hacking, out of ransomware, and we've heard it all before. And it's not that. Why is it all happening? It's happening, I think, because the complexity of the environment of the enterprise network has grown so much that it's no longer possible to define it within the boundaries of your company. It's no longer a geographical space with neat perimeter around it. We have all sorts of devices, bring your own, all sorts of different cloud technologies and virtual machines that are spinning up and down all around the company. And cyber criminals have realized this and have also realized that one of the easiest ways to gain access then to the vast, valuable amounts of data that we have, be them on consumers and passwords or whatever it is, or intellectual property on products you're developing, is to trick humans into inadvisable actions. For example, clicking on a phishing email. Now, we've all gotten pretty good at discerning emails such as this one. So we received this one. Hi, my name is Miss Anna Garange. I'm 25 years old and I'm free-minded, open heart girl. So we're kind of accustomed, apart from the fact that it says spam in the subject line. But if you were to get this email, I think most of us in this room would guess that this isn't a legitimate correspondence with a legitimate offer, much like your long-lost aunt who's left you a fortune of an inheritance or a Nigerian prince promising you a quick buck on gold transportation. But these emails are getting more and more sophisticated. And one of the ones that we've actually received is my colleague Dave Palmer received this email one morning shortly after a conversation of his with one of our colleagues as they went for a cup of coffee. And let's just read it real quick. I'm currently evaluating and reworking the training material for customers and partners. I've created a short test for trainees to see if they have achieved their learning objectives. Simon, by the way, true person at Darktrace, has helped me, and he's really helped me out with the macros in the background as he's an Excel wizard. But there are two things here that give away this email as being of concern. The first is, actually, sorry, before I go to the concern, the other thing is that both Simon and Matt, the supposed sender of the email, are two legitimate people who work at Darktrace, who Dave has day-to-day interactions with and was working on this project. So at first glance, it looks legitimate, but Matt's not this nice. Yeah. So there's something wrong with this. And of course, Dave wouldn't actually click on an Excel with macros enabled because, of his background. And we can imagine then the use of AI in the not too distant future being able to process natural language for the purposes of tricking people and doing a better job at communicating and trying to get then the Daves of the situation to click on an email that then turns out to be a malicious payload or a piece of ransomware. And we can start seeing this because we're already starting to give trust, and we're building trust in the day-to-day, and we're giving access to AI assistance. And so just to illustrate that point, let's look at a very quick exchange. We have XAI, who's a virtual assistant, one that has done tremendous amounts of research into natural language processing, and I'm by no means endorsing or not endorsing them. But you can copy in Amy at XAI, and here we have an exchange between Greg and Mary trying to set up a coffee conversation, CCing XAI in. Amy responds, let's get something into the diary. The conversation continues between the two people. Mary responds saying, yes, mornings are not so good. Amy understands that, processes that understanding, and then sends out a calendar invitation, and the two go to coffee.
Now, this kind of natural language processing isn't reserved for really advanced PhD mathematicians out of Cambridge University. This is actually basic stuff that can be learned on online courses, even, for example, at this one here that is offered by the University of Stanford online. So we don't even need to get onto a plane and go all the way out to California to learn how to do natural language processing. And that barrier for technology and machine learning has been lowered so much so that we're starting to see the first signs of attackers using machine learning and AI in those attacks. And so we start seeing headlines such as these, where we see a dramatic increase, not only with the speed and sophistication of those attacks, with AI powering those strategies, and we have already started seeing the weaponization of AI. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, don't worry, because we are also here as AI defenders. And we can start using the power of AI to bake it into cybersecurity products and give us a chance to fight back. One thing I would, though, caution is that, we've all heard it, and also Dr. Leonard said it this morning, you can't just put data into a machine and expect it to figure stuff out, and out comes an AI model, and out comes a solution. And in fact, many, many, many startups, especially in the cyber world, are now promising AI solutions and AI-powered solutions. I would say a little bit of buyer beware here. Try to understand what's inside of that technology. Is it actually using AI? We have an enormous amount of startups and enormous amount of investment that is coming into this industry and sector, and companies are starting up. And so as you evaluate that platform, as you're thinking, okay, well, does this security tool, does this, fill in the industry, does this tool for whatever application, does it actually have true AI? Does it have mathematicians? Does it have a good application? And why is that? Because machine learning is really hard to get right for the real world. So one of the first things that we've seen in the evolution has been transformation towards automation. So we can predict and set certain rules, and a machine can do them over and over and over again and never get tired. And that's a fantastic thing. Not only because we can suddenly start sending out purchase orders or repeat a campaign. In the cyber world, we can start thinking, okay, well, if there's this kind of an attack, here's the playbook. From these 25 steps that takes a human being half an hour to do, we can get a machine to do them a lot faster. So if we can respond a lot faster, then the damage is contained. But that's not really learning. That's learning a playbook, but it's not really learning what's out there. And so for us, what Darktrace has done is had a look at saying, all right, well, what's difficult about security, and why is this really challenging for machines to learn? Well, the first challenge is that no two companies are alike. The company that does banking might have a fundamentally different network and different network configuration than something that is in a consumer application of fintech, but conversely might be really, really similar to a manufacturing of cars because of the way they're set up. So because no two networks are alike, there's no way to teach a computer what normal is or what good is. And if we can't tell a computer this equals good and this equals bad, then that's actually very hard to then go out into the world and use machine learning for cyber defense. So how do we do that? Well, Darktrace decided to reverse the problem. Instead of figuring out, well, instead of determining what's good and bad, we took inspiration from the immune system and from the biological world. Definitely one of the most powerful defense mechanisms that we have. Our immune systems are able to distinguish what makes me different than what makes you. Our immune systems are innate, and they evolve over time, and they're able to discern when something that gets in, that shouldn't have been in, starts behaving a little bit weird or a little bit anomalously. And then it takes action to be able to correct that. The other great thing about the immune system analogy is also the way that it's not about the network, it's not about systems, it's not about the rules. It's about what looks different and what looks weird in the context of the network ecosystem or of your business. So one of the things that we often get asked is, okay, but if you then install Darktrace and there's already a compromise or there's already a security flaw, how do you learn that that is already in there? Well, what we see is that with vast amounts of data, which we're all very excited about, we can start clustering and categorizing and doing things like finding peer groups. And so the computer doesn't need to know that this is a group of marketers or that this is a group of developers. It just understands that these devices and these users all work in a similar way, and these are all similar. And so if within a peer group, for example, you then have one that is really, really weird, but within that group, we can guess with some level of accuracy that, okay, there's something weird there, and that's where we need to be looking at. And in the noise of the network, that's very powerful because we're spotting the anomalies, not necessarily defining what's good and bad. And that then gives us time as humans to intervene and say, okay, well, is this weird good and explainable? Because maybe we're opening a new market somewhere and therefore that person's in charge of new business development in a whole new part of the world. Or maybe is this weird bad because it's the first sign of a compromise. And so we take all of this data and we do all of this modeling over 350 different parameters, and we let the machine learn the network directly on the job and evolve its understanding. So we don't train Darktrace to say, here's what a normal network looks like. We install it in an hour, it delivers value within a week, and then companies are able to leverage machine learning in practical terms for something that has learned directly in their own environment. So that's been one of the very, very powerful things that then helps people understand, okay, this is something that is about me, this is my network, and we show it to them back in context. And it makes a lot of sense, both for the tech teams, but also for the C-level. So we said, I mentioned deployment. It's, Darktrace can be deployed in a week. A lot of tech companies out there, a lot of cyber tools take months, if not years, to deploy because you need to configure, you need to teach it rules. For machine learning and AI to really work, I think it needs to work from day one, because we lose that enthusiasm and momentum if we're waiting for a whole 12 months to get back the results. I'm going to plug it in. I'm going to say, right, what is this finding? So if you'll allow me some considerations for what maybe you can think of and how you guys can bring AI and implement AI-powered solutions within your organizations. And this doesn't need to be within the context of cybersecurity. The first thing is choose to do it in a real-world situation where you won't spend an enormous amount of time configuring and preparing for it. You want to go in, you want to use that enthusiasm, and you want to say, let's start. And then tweak as you go along. One of the things that we've also seen is maybe don't do it in something that is mission critical, because there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of unknown around that. And we want to basically take away the fear for when we need to get sign-off for a project like this. We want to take away the fear and really embrace it and say, look, this is a really powerful piece of technology. It can help us make a small difference, a large difference. We need to start somewhere. One of the things we found very helpful in the context of cybersecurity is to give our customers a menu of options. So 2 years ago, Darktrace announced a product called Antigena, which is essentially a digital antibody. Antigena sees that something is wrong on your network or anomalous, and it autonomously takes action on that network. And that was a very scary proposition, because you're asking IT, basically the IT teams and the network teams, for us to allow to come in and suddenly say, all right, you're going to do some machine learning, and then the machine's going to intervene on its own. And in order for us to build that trust, what we've seen is that humans get more comfortable with the machine learning and AI decision when it's had time to validate it. So we present customers with a menu of choices and say, right, maybe these are some situations where you want to allow it to take some action or stop network traffic. So for example, with ransomware, suddenly your computer starts making, if you will, a bunch of different connections like phone calls to a bunch of different systems that it's never connected to before at a very, very high speed. Well, we can then say, all right, allow the enterprise immune system to sort of stop those connections and only those connections and let everything else happen. And this was a terrific way with which then executives and security teams could see, all right, Darktrace is seeing something anomalous. This is what we're suggesting we do. Do you agree? And the humans then get to confirm that action. The security teams get to review before it takes action to say, yes, that is the correct type of response for this situation. And over time, as you're building that confidence, we're allowing it to do more and more things. And again, that speed of response dramatically then decreases the extent with which your enterprise could have damage inflicted. So the idea is try to also find technologies that will allow you to take AI and also build that confidence in stages rather than saying, right, here's AI, let's go. It's very difficult sometimes for people who are not understanding of how exactly it works just to understand that it does work. So we can do that in steps. Now, one of the great accelerators in embracing this type of technology I found to be regulation. And this has basically put it to the top of decision makers and boards everywhere, because what we've seen, first of all, this has nothing to do with Nielsen's 2%, but rather 2.45% is a magic number that I've calculated on the basis of the word count, and I promise it's the only time I'll say it, of GDPR. Now, GDPR has a little piece in it that, apart from the how you process data, how you collect data, and how you opt in people, there's a part in it that says you need to be able to spot if there has been a data breach of some kind. And you need to then report it within 72 hours of having found out that there was a breach, and you need to have investigated to some degree what that breach was and what happened. That one small piece is hugely important, because you can't use the defense of, oh, I had no way of knowing about the breach. You need to have security tools in place. But as a portion of the legislation, it only makes up 2.45% of the word count. And I think it's really interesting, because you're still subject to the full power of the law with fines and the terrible things that can happen if you're not compliant. But for you to be able to spot that breach notification, suddenly companies are thinking like, oh my God, how do I find it? Because there's so much data. And in that vast amount of data, you really need AI to be able to fight back. Because as I said, the attackers are using AI. They are getting more and more sophisticated. They're finding new and novel ways to get around security and perimeter products that we've been relying on for very many years in the security world. So it's time for the machine to fight back. Leave you with one case study. We deployed in a network, it was based here in the UK, of an e-commerce company. And this company, you'll be very familiar with this, has a marketing team that used cloud platforms to be able to store customer data. So credit card information, billing information, frequency, recency of purchase, all of that wonderful stuff, indicators, profiles, and all of the stuff on the customer. This is the treasure trove of data for this company. And they had very good security parameters in place. They had all the right things in terms of authentication and the correct network. And what happened was that, unfortunately, this company wasn't doing so well, and they had undergone a restructuring, and a number of their employees had been let go, including somebody of their development team who thought, we assume, by the way, I haven't spoken to the developer, but they went in and downloaded a very large amount of data pertaining to from the customer database in the cloud onto their devices. Now, some behavioral analytics tools out there would say, yeah, that's perfectly normal. Our users do it all the time. We have a whole marketing department and sales department that use customer data, and they're copying stuff and they're looking it up. So why was this different? This was different because of a few very small indicators that just made it look a bit odd. First of all, this person was in development, not in marketing and sales. The vast amount of data was also much larger than what a sales or marketing person would look at or would copy for a reasonable exploration of saying, okay, I wonder if I can come up with a new product or whatever it was. And lastly, there was then another connection made between the worker's computer to his home computer. And the idea is, if you remote desktop back to your house computer, you can very quickly transfer all that data out. I don't even need to put it on a memory stick. I can just transfer it virtually. So we were able to spot that connection and block the transfer of the data from happening because we see it in real time. And we saw that that was a combination of factors that were very weak in and of themselves, but together were a picture of something very anomalous, very strange. And they blocked the connection, said, right, we need to look into this. Do we allow this connection or not? And unfortunately, this was a situation of an insider gone bad. Also, very, very big risks to companies, and a very challenging type of security situation, which I think really AI is the only way forward to give us a fighting chance to stay ahead of the game. With that, thank you very much, and I'll be available for questions.